So welcome everyone, we're really glad you're here. This panel is Beautism. We're talking about Beautism and sexuality, and this is something that I think is really important for all humans. There are handouts in the center, there's 2 sheets if you want them, and if you want a copy of the video afterwards, or recording just us. If you don't want your voice recorded for some reason, you just say that if you speak up, and we'll just wipe that audio out. But the video will be available afterwards for people that are in other panels or couldn't make it to the conference. So there's a link at the top of the handout, and you can also sign up on the sheet that's going around, so that hopefully it can reach more people and more people can think about this. So my name is Kathy Bertolli. I run the Intimacy Dojo, and I started exploring my sexuality when I was 40 because I hadn't dated at that point in 14 years because I'm a big person, and I thought that nobody would want to date me, and I found out that was a total lie. It was a lot of it was the shame that was there for me. I have a lot of shame, and that's not sexy. But there is a lot of stigma out there about how we should look in order to be a sexual human being. If we don't match the conventional cookie cutter of what we see on TV, we get very little reinforcement for the fact that we can have sexual desires, sexual needs, that we can be desirable. And I've had people come up to someone I was flirting with and say, oh, you can't do better, to the other person that was right next to them, that was flirting with me. And that's out there. That's part of what happens in this world. We're taught that our status comes a lot from who we're dating and who we're fucking. And if we can get someone who's high value, according to the standards we see brainwashing us constantly, that we're supposed to look a certain way, we're supposed to be young, skinny, we're probably supposed to be white, unfortunately, we should be able-bodied, there's all these lists of things, we should be cisgendered, there's all these things that we get broadcast to us every day by media that tell us who and who is not sexual, who is not desirable. And we want to explore this and give you some ways to kind of fight back and see through the haze that we get bombarded with, so that because everybody's sexual, everybody has desires, and everybody wants to be desirable. So I really appreciate you coming in and talking. It's not an easy subject. It challenges a lot of things that our brain has accepted as easy in black and white. We like black and whites. I like knowing that a building that says restaurant on it is going to serve me food. We have expectations. That makes humans function more efficiently. But some of those expectations are very poorly designed and harm people. So I really appreciate you being here. Would you like to proceed?
Sure. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Good morning or afternoon. My name is Erin Tillman, aka the Dating Advice Girl. I am based out of LA. I've been a dating coach for 10 years, around 10 years now, which is nuts. And you know, Kathy and I did this panel at ConvergeCon in LA last year, was it? And it was really great when she asked me to be a part of it, because being a dating coach, as you can imagine, in Los Angeles, like the outer beauty or physical, what we perceive as beauty is just part of everything there, you know, whether we're aware of it or not, it's just part of it. So, you know, I deal a lot with clients who I help them get onto dating apps or choose a dating app that might work for them. A lot of them are older baby boomers who are like, I haven't been single since the 80s and I have zero idea of how to do this. So, you know, it's about me literally, if I'm sitting with a client, I'll be like, just so you know, like it is a visual thing. It's a visual game. It is subjective, and feelings, you might get your feelings hurt a little because of the nature of what the dating apps are. And it's not fair and it sucks, but it's just part of it. If you're gonna play the game, you gotta know that beauty and image is part of it. So yeah, I have a lot of other thoughts, but anyway, all of this to say, this is my intro, but I'm going off. I'm already starting the panel, sorry. Yeah, so dating coach Nelly for 10 years, just wrote a book on consent. Please come to the Me Too panel at 2:30. I just said in the panel over there, you know, we need to hear from everyone about all of these topics, so please come to that later. But I wrote a book on consent, and that's a big part of what I do right now too, so thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm just here. Okay. Good afternoon. It is afternoon. Good morning. Okay, so I am Trimonika Igor, and a lot of my work has
has to do with sexual education with adolescents, and I do a lot of work with trauma survivors, which is just the best thing ever for me. And I do see a lot of working with teenagers, and they get hit with so much visual things. Like, I have girls come up to me, and they're like 13, and they're like, but I don't have breasts, so he's not gonna date me. And I'm like, oh God, baby, I'm so sorry. Like, breasts are hard as it is. Like, that shouldn't be your focus right now. Like, you have so many other things going on. And I think being a black woman in LA, like Erin and I live like down the street from each other, it's really hard dating as a black woman because being fetishized, I get smacked with that every day. So I just stopped dating for a while. And growing up, it's really hard. Everything that I've been made fun for, like my lips, my long legs, my breasts, my hair, all these things are now cool, right? But my whole life it was like, this isn't cool, you look like this, which led to me struggling to meet these status quos, and it became an eating disorder. And so having all of these things being hit every day, like, you can't get away from this. If you have eyes, like, if you can hear, if you are breathing, it is gonna hit you every day. And so I think these conversations are really important because we are sexual beings. And a lot of the times, and I've been saying this all weekend, is we get in our heads a lot because media tells us these things and you're like, should I believe this? I did see this a lot. You know what? I'm not doing this. God, I'm fucking up. And then the spiral is downhill so quick. And so that's why I think these conversations are so important because they're around us every day. So if we're not talking about it, maybe there's something like you don't understand, or maybe there's something you're going through and you feel like you're going through it alone. When you're having the conversation out loud, finally getting out of your head, someone next to you is like, oh, I've been waiting for someone else to say this, thank you so much. And you're like, oh, there's other people. So having these conversations about sexuality, about Beautism, and the connection of them allows us to find community in the struggle. So that's why I think this conversation is important.
Wonderful, thank you. One of the things that really surprised me, I grew up a little bit plump, I never felt pretty, and as I got older, I got bigger, I had a belief that people that were conventionally pretty had everything together. That they didn't have problems like I did, they didn't feel insecure, and they looked very happy. And as I started coaching, I did a lot of ongoing coaching overseas, but with international clients, and we were on the phone, so I couldn't see these people. And I was building rapport with people that I couldn't make assumptions about. And they would explain about their shame and their vulnerability and their fears. And then over time, if I happened to see a photo of them, someone was like, you're conventionally pretty, how is this possible? You have these problems. And one of the things I've discovered is we all get put in boxes based on how we look. So some boxes may have some privilege associated with them, but they also have structures and strictures where you're objectified. We're all being objectified, and I really like when I get to know someone well enough that I don't even notice if they're pretty or not. They're just wonderful to me. Yeah. And it's hard to do that quickly. We try to make efficient decisions about who we connect with, and like Erin was talking about dating sites, like some of them are just like people literally swipe to like judgment.
Most of them are like
yeah. So how do you get past these judgments that we have to make every day that are often embedded in our subconscious? We're just trying to, our survival brain wants to know that we fit in, that we have status, that we're hanging out with the cool people, the people that are going to survive and get the resources to procreate, find other people to procreate with. So there's that structure. Like we're like put in boxes where people get objectified as sexual or not sexual versus letting our own self-expression come out. Or letting people actually find out who we are.
It's interesting you say that because that was all great things that you said, but specifically it triggered something in me where I think it was a couple of years ago, it was like 2014 that OkCupid went through and based on who was being selected, they said that Black women and Asian men were the least desirable. And it was really interesting because like we all have our own individual experiences with dating. Like I am a dating coach, I am single and dating, I have a couple partners, and it's interesting because there are definitely a ton of people who don't find me attractive, you know? I mean, I've all the things, you guys, just because I'm a dating coach, I'm not exempt. I've been stood up a bunch, like all the things, okay? It's ridiculous, so I get it, you know? But it's interesting because I still have dated a decent amount, and so when that statistic came came up, I was like, it's interesting, because it's not, I don't necessarily think about all the people who aren't choosing me. I know there are people who aren't choosing me, but I guess it was just kind of interesting to be like, wow, these are the two categories of people that are seen as the least desirable. Because, we should all be dating people who think we're beautiful and fantastic, and I am very selective, as you can imagine, so the people I do date either like black women in a non-fetishy way, or they are like, oh, you're so beautiful. So it was interesting to see the statistic, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm good at selecting, because I'm sure there are people who, again, I know there are people who don't find me attractive, but I feel fortunate, I guess, that I'm not necessarily hearing that, although I have gotten the messages that are like, just the trolly messages on dating apps. A lot of us have gotten them, I can't say we all have, but it was just interesting though, and then Asian men, I've always found, and that's obviously a big grouping of Asian men, but I mean, it was interesting because I've dated, Japanese men and Korean men, and I think they're so beautiful. So it was just interesting, it's just so interesting what, I guess the mainstream statistic might say is attractive or not, and I guess it's based on what people were choosing on that app, so I can't even say it's, it's not, I guess it's not biased or whatever, but it's just interesting. So.
I don't know, I feel like all these apps are pretty damn biased.
Yes.
And it's like looking at like who's creating these apps.
Yes.
Like who's filling out the surveys. I see surveys all the time and I'm like, I don't have time for this. So it's like who is taking the time to fill out the survey, and like, again, we all like different things. And so that, I don't know how I feel about those things. And,
I don't know, I know what you're saying. Obviously, the app creators are mostly male, mostly, by the way, if anyone has the actual statistics of who these app creators are, but in my mind, the ones I know of are usually white men.
White cis men.
Right, white cis men, exactly. So a lot of the apps do skew more for cisgender, more traditional relationship styles, all the things, right? And so, but again, anyway, I hear your point, absolutely, and it's not a debate at all. It's interesting because it goes back to standards of beauty and what people perceive as attractive. Or, if you're on one of the apps and your main way of judging someone is by a photo, what are we even aware of why we're choosing someone or not? Sometimes I think we are. I definitely know people who are like, I won't date this race, or I won't date over a certain height, or under a certain height, or all the things. And so it's just a very interesting thing, because all of that's in the beauty category, whether it's race, height, hair color, whatever it is, right? So, yeah, it's interesting.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it's a really convoluted, there's a lot of subtleties in this. People do have preferences. I do get that some people just do not prefer big people, that's fine. But when it's conventionally, or a race, or whatever it is, we get to have erotic and sensual preferences, things we find sensual in themselves. But I think so many of us are brainwashed, and I'm pointing fingers back at me, I'm not saying you all, I'm saying everybody, I think. We've been so conditioned by society. There's an estimate that someone did that said just on fat alone, we get 300,000 negative messages a year from media, TV, magazines. We're seeing that. And that's literally brainwashing. That's just about size. And that's not about race or ability or cis or not cis. Yeah.
I think part of this is cultural as well.
Yes.
I am from a culture where the larger body type is revered. There are men who specifically just think that, when they will tell me, you're too skinny. When I hold on to a woman who is bigger than you, I feel very, I feel different, and it's beautiful to me. And that's great. And the concern that I'm hearing is that in this culture, because I'm an immigrant, obviously from the accent, dead giveaway, but in this culture, there tends to be the idea that if you're not very thin, very tall, very blonde, that somehow you're not that attractive, or you get thrown into this box of people who like to fetishize. My experience being here has been a little different, where I've encountered the fetishists, which was very creepy and very weird.
It is.
Coming from a culture like mine, I was like, what is this?
Trash.
But then,
Trash.
and then you eventually meet someone who may not have thought is kind of dating against their type, but has seen something in you that has been attractive to that person, and then the rest of that stuff just doesn't matter, right? And I'm just looking at it as, I think there's some very culture-bound issues that come up around beauty, and that what is not beautiful in one culture is absolutely beautiful in another.
love that you share that. And like in the 18th century, bigger people were valued. And like it switches, but it's all about status and objectification in a lot of ways. I throw play parties in San Jose, right? And there's a lot of people from Silicon Valley that have not had a lot of experience with humans. And they'll come to the party and they're like, I want to play with that person who meets the conventional standards. And I'm like, that person is busy right now and they're not necessarily available to entertain you. And they can't see anyone else because no one else is fitting in that standard. And I use a kind of silly analogy, but if you had a pile of M&Ms here of all different colors, and you were decided that the green M&Ms were too slutty. I'm just using that for Horny Wednesdays, that's what we used to do as kids. The yellow M&Ms were too intellectual. Like, we just start pushing colors off for being too much of something or another. Only the blue M&Ms are good. And then we have everybody's looking at each other like they're M&Ms, and like, are you a blue M&M? What color M&M are you? And then we wonder why we have trouble finding, like it feels like there's nobody out there. Where we're looking through a lens or we're filtering people out by very and often superficial standard, and then we're wiping out like 4/5 of the M&Ms going, there's nobody here for me. Geez, what a lousy party versus wow, there might be some really cool people out there. So I see people being very lonely and very isolated, feeling like there's nobody for them because they think only if they get the blue M&M will I have enough status. There's often an insecurity associated with that. If I can get that thing, all of a sudden I'll feel better about myself, or at least for a few minutes. It's almost like a drug.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I had so many thoughts about what you both said. So, a little backstory on me. So, I grew up in small town Ohio in the States, and I was the only black person basically in my school. There were maybe like 2 others. I was the only one in my grade for sure, and then like junior year, like someone new came to town and they were a black guy and they were like, you should date him. And I'm like, what? Just because we're both black, I don't understand. But so it's interesting though, because I mean, standards of beauty were a very interesting thing growing up there. Because, I was quote unquote, whatever popular means, like student government, I was prom princess, but I never had a date to any of the dances, ever. I didn't have a boyfriend until I went to college. And then I really got it noticed when I studied abroad in France, and that's when I was like, oh, like literally for the first time, it was like race wasn't a thing. Specifically, if we're talking about my experience, race hasn't been a big part of being seen as attractive or not. And so when I went to France, specifically in England a little bit too, people were, oh, like I was getting all this male attention, and I was like, what? Like, wow. But it's interesting because I mean, in Ohio, so every time I would go back home to visit, it was like literally this period of like 5 years where every time I would go back home, there would be some old classmate that was like, I had the biggest crush on you, but I couldn't ask you out because my parents were racist. They literally said those words to me. And I was like, I mean, I had like all these specific thoughts about, well, one, God, all my neuroses about not being attractive, false. Okay, so it would have been interesting info to know back when you're a kid. But when you're a kid, there's always someone who like secretly likes you and doesn't like you or whatever, right? But I was like, wow, that's interesting. And the second part was, it's obviously we're influenced by our families in some way, whether we like it or not, and then we choose to go along with that or go against what we've learned from our community and families. But it's just a very interesting thing to see, especially as a kid, and I'm sure we all have similar experiences of like, the whatever she looked like, girl getting asked out a bunch, or having, this girl having, because I can relate, I was relating to the other girls in my class, like, why are they being chosen? Like, why am I not being chosen? Like, what is wrong with me that I am not attracted to these boys? But then the truth is revealed, and it's like, oh, it had nothing to do really about my level of attractiveness or not, which is subjective anyway, of course. But it's like, wow, okay, so, like, some of these kids were literally, like, their parents would have, like, one more story, quick anecdote. Senior year of high school, I met this guy in this, like, 18 and over club that was, like, in the town that was, like, we were both from small towns, so it was like the biggest town date in Ohio. There was like this 18 and up club. Anyway, I met him, he was super cute, he was a white guy, and he was like, oh my god. So we started sort of dating from afar, before cell phones, because I'm my late 30s, so I know all of those things. I know pre-cell phone. But, and I remember we would call, and at one point his parents cut off his long distance. So he specifically said they cut it off because they didn't want me calling you. And I'm like, you guys, this is like the 90s. This was in the 90s, okay? Like, it's not that far long ago or whatever, but it's like, I don't know, it's just that's a whole other conversation we could get into about all kinds of other things. But yeah, it was just a very interesting experience to see your peers having a certain life experience and feeling like you're not a part of it and you're not sure why, and then later on in life you're like, oh, that was why. You know, oh my God. And then again, I feel very fortunate that I did have the opportunity to go to a different country and have a totally different experience. I mean, like even just throughout history, there are a lot of Black Americans who have moved to Europe because it's just a different experience. And so I'm very grateful that, I mean, I feel like in a lot of ways I came into my own when I left the States, you know, because I had this other experience where it wasn't based on, they had, I mean, listen, other countries obviously have their own issues around all this stuff, obviously, right? But for me being Black, going to Europe, I had it didn't matter for like the first time ever. And I was like, oh, they just think I'm a like cute American exchange student. This is awesome. So yeah, it's very interesting.
I think it's interesting, like we are a little bit different in age, but I literally have had the same life.
Yeah.
And so I think we're always like, well, race doesn't matter, but everyone knows it does, right? Like I'm smacked with it every day, like, it's nothing like hearing, you're so cute for a Black girl. I'm sorry, what now?
Yeah.
Or you're not like the other Black girls. I'm sorry, you've met all of them?
Yeah.
All of them? I haven't even met all of them. Kind of thing. So it's interesting, like in high school, I wasn't Black enough. So all the Black kids were like, oh, you think you're cute? And so me in my head, I'm like, who's cute? I'm looking around like, oh, me. All right, well, that's weird. And then the rich white kids were racist. So then my ass is sitting in a classroom with my teacher. And so then I get to college, and suddenly I'm the cream of the crop because I'm young, I'm cute, I got great boobs, it's happening. And I'm like, oh, I'm dating, I'm getting attention. I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm gonna have sex. And so it's like, you're great, you're beautiful, but don't have too much sex, right? Because then you're a slut.
Right.
Because then, you know, you're sharing too much of yourself, but not like you didn't have the conversations. Like there wasn't consent already, but it doesn't matter because you're beautiful. You should be kept in your room and do some homework, which is clearly not what I did at all. I skipped all of that. But it went from, oh my God, you're so great to, did you see her? Did you hear what you did last night? And I'd be like, ooh, oh me. Oh, we're talking about me now.
You see me reading M&M.
Oh yeah. Just good at it though. But the difference, it's so crazy how you go from like one world and growing up to like all these negative things, and then you're finally like, fuck it, I'm gonna do what makes me happy. And then they find a way to come back and be like, that's so great that you became comfortable with yourself, but let me tell you how bad of a person you are. Right? It's like an uphill struggle sometimes. And I think it's important for us to be able to like talk about like race, because it's real. Like we can be like, oh, we're all the same. We're not the same. Like, realistically, my struggles are different from your struggles. Some of ours are the same.
And some of ours are different, by the way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Totally sure.
But yeah.
But talking about like female-bodied people and like how we're like taught to be like, oh, be cute, but don't be too cute.
Right.
Be quiet, don't be too loud. Be sexual, but not too much now. Now keep your legs closed. Like it's tricky. There's like finding a balance between beautyism and sexuality. Like what does that mean? Like they do connect. Unfortunately, like you would hope like I can just be cute, just live my life. But no, because someone's gonna come around and be like, you're cute, but also like I'm gonna sexualize you and say all these ridiculous things to you, and you're like, well, why? I'm just trying to get through one thing at a time.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
No. It's okay.
Thanks for sharing that. I had an experience too where I love what you shared about we changed through our life, we changed different cultures. I was a very, very shy, quiet, plump college student, and I didn't have dates, I hadn't dated. I went to China for a year because there was, at the time in the late 80s, there was not a lot of food. So if someone who was plump had status, that meant you had money. Someone who was blonde, the lighter your skin and your hair, that meant you weren't out in the sun so much, you weren't a laborer. So I would have people, all of a sudden I had all this attention at me, and some of it was sexual, some of it was just admiring or whatever. I had little ladies with bound feet from they come up and touch my hair. And I noticed the attention was really fulfilling in some ways. While there was some objectification, there was also, I think that we tend to, we're taught that we're supposed to be tough people and we're just supposed to, if we're not getting the attention, we're supposed to do something to get that attention. But I do notice that when I'm getting positive attention, I'm more relaxed. I think my face looks prettier. There's something more fulfilling when we're getting that attention. Actually makes people more attractive because we're not so empty. So we were talking the other day, I was talking with some friends about how we all have tanks or buckets that we need to get filled. And life is hard for a lot of people, like things happen and we're struggling with different beliefs and fears and we have all the negative thoughts we have about ourselves all the time. But when we're getting some positive attention from other people and just kind of even a mild flirt with someone, just like, oh, okay, I've noticed, I'm seen and heard. And I think that there's a lot of times that if we're not fitting in that little narrow paradigm that's sexual, we're not seen as sexual. It's literally like we're invisible for that. And that saps some of our strength, it saps some of our power. And we're not as fulfilled, so we're not gonna feel as alive and vital sometimes, unless we're getting that from some really close friends. But just walking down the street, I think there's like, positive attention, even a negative attention can be better than just being invisible sometimes.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I've gotten into debate with friends over the, not specifically catcalling, because that is a specific kind of appreciation. That's wrong, but you get it. It's interesting because I think that, how do I say this? I'll just say it. I have an interesting cross-section of things. I somehow in my mind, even if I'm annoyed by, even let's just say a full catcall, there's something about me personally, I'm not saying this is anyone else's experience, that kind of is like, you know what, when I'm 70, I'm gonna remember that and be like, oh, I looked good that day. Now, there are days when I'm like, effing stop talking, like leave me alone, I just wanna be. But again, my own personal experience is very nuanced. Like for me, a lot of that is, listen, and I just wrote a book on consent and all these things. That's why I'm like, choose your words carefully. But what I'm saying is that all of our personal experiences are different and boundaries are different around this stuff. And it's definitely not okay. My own personal filter that I receive it through is, oh man, kind of like sort of piggybacking what you're saying. Sometimes I don't think I look cute. And if someone thinks I look cute that day and wants to shout it out, I'm kind of like, you know what? I don't want to talk to that person, but today, I'm like, I'm gonna take that, because I kind of need that for myself today. And so again, and I know, debates, many debates with friends about it. That's my own personal way that, and as I'm saying this, another part of my brain, because I have lots of thoughts all the time, is like, maybe that's like a weird coping thing, I don't know, but I just thought I would share that.
Hi. I have a couple of things I want to say. One is that, and it's kind of related a little bit to what you're talking about, and a few other things, but for example, the kink community. I feel like in the kink community, people are sort of seen as attractive or desirable for different reasons, and so I found for myself, when I got into the kink community, I felt more attractive than I had felt in my whole life. That was because people were interested in what I was into, and they were, valuing me as a sexual being based on other things. And back to what I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Me?
Yeah.
Erin.
What Erin was saying, sorry, I'm so bad. What Erin was saying about the objectification. Some people love to be objectified and love to be in that space, but someone like the kink community or FetLife, fill your boots. You can put up pictures, you can do whatever you want, and it's in a consensual mode. So, for me, I enjoy that kind of sexual way of attention, and so I can fill my boots on somewhere like FetLife or in a community, or I can dress a certain way in these venues. And so I guess my point is kind of a fewfold, but one is that we can put ourselves in positions or in communities or in parts of the world where we're going to be interacting with people who find us attractive for those reasons, and I feel very empowered by that. And then the other last thing I just want to say quickly is I remember, the people who were really traditionally beautiful in high school and stuff struggled so much as they aged, from my opinion, because they was their status. Whereas, I was kind of the average girl, I had whatever, here and there. Some people like me, it wasn't everybody's cup of tea. But as I got older, I felt more and more attractive because I was interacting with people who value that in me and I value that in them. So, so I feel like it's a pretty positive journey in that way for me.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that.
Someone else, I saw another hand.
I just wanted to comment on the catcalling. I was talking to another woman who, she does sex work like me, and she basically takes it as worship. And there's a certain energy that you give out when, like her friend, who was just in like long sleeves and baggy pants, always got catcalled because there was an energy of like, don't you fucking dare to catcall. I'm going to hit you. And for her, she's like short shorts and like a tank top and just like, oh, I'm like nothing. That I think beauty and sexuality, there's a huge sadness in how they have told us we should be doing it. You know, the reclaiming of, yes, I want to be objectified, yes, I want to be sexual, and I want to date all these people, and here's how you can engage with me in my beauty and my sexuality. The fact that in the US, there's professional models who are paid thousands of dollars, but it has to be a look that you can't touch, right?
Or you have to pay to get, in some
Right.
cases. Yeah.
And that is so shamed upon. And instead of merging the kind of beauty and sexuality and reclaiming that for ourselves as, like I'm reading The Sacred Prostitute, and the fact this is a gift from the universe or above, and being sacred to that, and getting other people respect that there's sacredness in this body.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you. I think there's certainly an aspect of we can work on our own selves. I just read an online program for 9 weeks for body confidence, and we had a bunch of 200 of people go through and share their process of like what their thoughts were, how they talk to their body in different situations, including in the bedroom. And it was really, some people were like, oh, I thought everybody, this is normal. We're supposed to be negative to ourselves. We're supposed to be ashamed. And I do think that, like you were talking about how people walk and how they carry themselves, it definitely has an impact. When we feel really secure in ourselves, there's going to be less of the negative. People just, I think confidence comes off as status. It's like you've got it together. And it's really hard to hold that space when you're getting constantly bombarded with negative things. So I'm pretty confident. I've worked through a lot of my stuff, and I still have a YouTube channel, 4.5 million views, and people will write in there like, you're too fat to exist, or really hurtful, mean things. And I've gotten so that I'm like, wow, this person has a lot of issues, like, because they could have just not watched the videos if they were
Right.
But when I have a lot of support and I work through stuff, but it's just like if you get stuff like that over and over, if you're being objectified for whatever over time, then I think of it as like we have a backpack we're carrying around, and every time something like that lands, it's another rock in there. And it's like it gets heavier and heavier as we walk through that.
Yeah.
So it's great, like just talking about it and making it known. A lot of us carry it in our subconscious, and it seems normal and real. But then if we start talking about it, articulate it, then it's like, oh, maybe that's bullshit. Maybe that isn't true. And that makes it easier to kind of push the rocks out of, kind of shrug them out.
Absolutely.
I think this is like a good conversation to continue to have. Like I love what everyone's been saying, especially since you're saying like it's something that stays with us, right? So, and some people I'm like, I'm cute for a black woman, whatever. Like, oh, I've got it. I've got the things that people like. But in the back of my head, constantly, I'm like, oh God, I'm not good enough. My boobs aren't good enough. They've always said I have like a body like a white girl, right? So I have big breasts, long legs, no ass. I got it recently, so don't worry. But it's like, that's what I was told my whole life. So in the back of my mind, I'm constantly like, okay, I'm still not fitting in. I'm still not fitting in. I'm still not fitting in. No matter how hard sometimes we try to fit into these norms, it's not gonna happen. Because these norms are made up from, I don't know who made them up.
Yeah.
They're terrible. And they're set up to make us feel like crap, right? So it's, I don't know who the model person is. There's different models, different areas. But also those models don't look like those models, if we're being honest. A lot of them are airbrushed, a lot of them have had work done, and there are such amazing people that do this work, but also it's really hard. A lot of them are struggling with depression and eating disorders, and it's hard for them to get up in the morning to go to these beautiful photo shoots that take 4 hours to make them look like that person that we're flipping through the magazine like, oh, I wish I could look like that. They don't even look like that. And so it's all the things that are pushed upon us that's like the best thing and who we're supposed to be. That's not even who they are. And I think it's very important for us to remember that. And again, it's easier said than done. But it's like, oh, she's great. She's also human and got bills to pay just like the rest of us. Like she may have been struggling to get out of bed that day.
But also, I bet you if you did a survey and asked people who were most comfortable in their skin and who felt most attractive, that it wouldn't be necessarily all the people that were the cultural standard of beauty.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the reality is that people who feel beautiful is for all the other different reasons, and a lot of models don't feel attractive at all.
Totally.
There, are people who are traditionally beautiful. I mean, somebody interacted with this weekend. I had a huge ass. I'm like, are you kidding me? So I think that's new because it's not coming from, like, we're being inundated with this, which is fucking us up, right? But really, people who come to that peace within themselves, they're not usually the people who are the standard beauties. So I think that's the interesting part of it, is like, how do we cultivate that, appreciation of our own inner and outer beauty, right?
I love it. I'm gonna piggyback on that. Yeah, well, yeah, and I mean, I spoke at another convention on, what day was it? Friday, in Vegas. It's crazy. But it came up around, oh my gosh, we're talking about different like advertisements and campaigns and stuff. And one thing I said at that panel that makes sense to say now is there's got to be more diversity in the marketing rooms. I mean, because I will say this, Kathy, like since we did this panel at Catalyst last year, whatever, however many months that was, I feel like I've tangibly seen a lot of changes since we did the panel last time.
The Target ads.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen.
They're actually putting people of size and people of color.
Yes, I mean, I know I'm actually not. Obviously, it's not perfect, but I'm seeing a lot of changes, and I feel like that's possibly because it's coming from the top. Like, there's more executives, more women are being hired, more, people of all races and religions, and I've seen a lot of Muslim women on advertising campaigns. It's just really great. I'm like, oh my God, like finally something's shifting. And I will say this, I'll do it. Maybe we should weirdly thank Trump, because I feel like so much has been happening in a positive way. Even with like Me Too, because that's all I'm thinking about lately. It's like, would it have been what it is if it wasn't for him and his nonsense? I don't know. Probably not, right?
I agree with that.
And so I think there's all these like weird but kind of amazing byproducts that are coming out of it. And yeah, the struggle's still happening, but I mean, I'm really, in a weird way, here's my positive glass half full side, I'm grateful for all of that, because so many amazing things are coming out of it. And I feel like even though there is obviously still some resistance to the evolution of all these things, there's a lot of people who are, because there have been so many voices saying, look at this thing that's been happening. Like, look, you might have thought it was done, but it's still happening in our culture now. People are finally like, maybe there is, maybe gender bias is still happening, maybe pussy grabbing is still happening, maybe racism is still happening. It's like, yes. And again, I say that all to say, though, still knowing that there's still a massive resistance. Because again, I come from a part of the Midwest in America where they're still super resistant to a lot that's happening right now. So I'm very, real quick, just a side note to all of this. I've had several conversations. So one of my things I like to do is I like to facilitate conversations. Hence, while we're here, I'm not facilitating, but meaning I love to be part of it and finding solutions. So I've had a lot of friends. If you couldn't guess, I lean liberal. Hello, I think a lot of us do probably at this convention conference. But I have a lot of friends, regardless of where their leanings are, who are like, oh well, I just don't want to I don't want to be around people who are thinking these things or this thing. And I'm like, that is the most dangerous thing. And I know it's self-care, but there are so many people I know who are like, people think the Nazis marching are crazy. I'm like, some people don't. But it's important to be in these other circles to really hear what other people are thinking, because not everyone is on board with all this stuff still. There's a lot of resistance. So that's just my soapbox real quick to say, diversify your friends, or not even friends, we gotta have boundaries, but diversify. It's important to hear what people are actually thinking in spaces that aren't your circle. I think that's really important right now, because I think we can get into this false sense of nonsense of like, no, it's all going the right way, which in some ways it is, but in some ways it's like there's still a lot to be done, you guys. Sorry, that's it.
Okay, one thing, I'm gonna say this, and I know it's being recorded. I am thankful that Trump is doing certain things, because I feel like him doing these things have shifted people to just be like, you know what?
Yeah.
I can't handle this anymore.
Right.
And it's forcing people out of their comfort zones and realizing, oh my God, I didn't even realize I was comfortable in this space. So
Yes,
it's making people more uncomfortable. And in uncomfort, we grow.
Yes.
And so there's people that are so tired of like being like, I've been saying this thing, you know what, forget it, I'll just create it myself.
Yes.
And so we are definitely in a creative space, and we are the ones that are changing it. The governments, they go back and forth, and that's not who we can really rely on, unfortunately.
Right.
But we are doing the work.
Yeah.
And we are now, like I have friends that are like, I'm a bigger body person, we need beautiful bathing suits, I'm gonna create more of my own line. And that's happening.
Yes.
You know what? We need a gender neutral clothing line.
Yep.
I'm gonna create it myself. That's happening. So this is pushing us to create the things that we've been talking about. Yeah, it's harder, but it has to happen by us, because if no one else is going to do it, we have to create these safer spaces. We have to create these spaces that we want to live in. We want the spaces where we can show up and just be comfortable in however skin, however body you're in, and be like, okay, this is it. Like, I don't have to be fit into a certain box because I'm perfect the way I am.
I just love what you shared, because I think that so much, like, media does this, that they're actually intentionally making us feel ashamed of our bodies. The models don't look like the models. There's no way to physically embody that. There's no way to get that perfection. So there's a sense of shame, just like for years, religion and government have tried to shame about our sexuality. It's a way to control us, and it's a way to make us buy things. But as we start stepping out and owning our own bodies, like, I am a big person, I want clothes that fit nicely, I don't want to feel ashamed about it, the money starts going someplace else. They're not getting the same bang for the buck.
Yeah.
With, before, the average person that reads Cosmopolitan, reads a magazine from cover to cover, says their self-esteem drops by 60% by the end of the magazine. What's in the magazine? It's full of ads. If you buy this thing, your teeth will be whiter, your breath will be fresh, your farts won't stink. It's, so we're seeing how, we don't measure up, so we want something to make us feel better. And when we start saying, hey, no, I don't want to do this, I'm gonna develop my own clothing line, I'm gonna start owning my body as it is and loving it, then we start standing up to that. We're making a difference just by being more aware and saying, no, that's bullshit.
Yeah, and I mean, so many things. Question? Do it.
I just want to highlight this thing that you guys are on, because I think there's some really important things in it that I just want to pull the threads out of it. People talk about they're trying to get voice of who, and I just want to really point out what you just said, Kathy, is really on point. My degree was in public relations. I went to school to learn how to do propaganda, and I also went to school to learn how to be a feminist. That was an interesting experience. And my ex-girlfriend was a celebrity makeup artist who worked with very, very, very high-end. Literally the last time I talked to her, she's like, I'm going to the White House tomorrow to do Michelle Obama's makeup.
Wow.
And she specialized in dark skin. And I ended up in really weird circles of that high-end fashion. And I have a subscription to Vogue, which is my secret hobby that everybody's shocked. And I'm very judicious about what I let in, because I know how much that is the case. And I think it's really important to acknowledge, it's not that there's a conspiracy. It is literally people invent problems in order to invent solutions to it. So they have to generate that there's something wrong with us. And I just want to highlight that point and really it's not them, it's capitalism, right? And it's that piece of making everyone feel bad about something.
Oh yeah.
Insecure, and it boils down to sexuality so often, because sexuality is about belonging and it's everything y'all are talking about. But I just think that's so important, and I just want to Yes, highlighted, like, situation.
It's interesting. Thank you for saying that. It's so true. I will say the other part of that though, and I would say so a little more backstory. So there's always some more backstory. Okay, so I lived in LA for 15 years. I too have done some work in the modeling realm, TV stuff. And I remember I moved to LA in 2003, and at that time, I remember I'd be on certain sets and they wouldn't have my color makeup. So it was an interesting thing to like roll in there, and they're like, no, just come with like, oh, the other thing that was always said is come with nude underwear. And so I would, at the time, there was no brown, because nude is different, obviously, or not obviously, for every skin color. So for me, the closest was black. So I literally remember walking onto set with a black bra and black underwear, and they're like, you didn't bring nude. And I had to have like a 10-minute conversation with the wardrobe person saying, this is my nude, this is the closest to nude, which obviously isn't, I'm wearing black right now, like hello. But at the time it was the closest, and she like didn't understand, and I was like, I literally was like holding up like what her beige nude was to my skin and saying, do you not see this doesn't match, this isn't nude for me. And it but it wasn't malicious, it was just like, wow, there's such a lack of understanding about this. So there's that, but then in addition to I wrote some notes here. So for me personally, especially in the last couple of years, just with everything that's going on, I've made a super conscious effort to not patronize businesses that aren't showing some diversity in their advertising. And that goes back to maybe somebody said something about, well, capitalism, we were all talking about that sort of, but for me it is like I was in Vegas, and the hotel I was staying at had some ads for a restaurant there or something. I was looking at all the people in the ad, and I'm like, there's not one person of color in this ad, and there's like 10 people in the ad. So, okay, whatever the reason was for that, I'm not gonna spend my money there. I'm just not, and for me, I mean, maybe if it was maybe the only choice, but it's not. And that's the thing too, it's like, if they're portraying a certain image to sell, and if that's what they're trying to do to sell, I am not going to give my money because their advertising and marketing was not on point. I can't think of the right words to put there, but yeah, inclusive or even effective for everyone. So for me, and maybe that was the point. Maybe the point was to not, to exclude certain people. Maybe they don't want a certain kind of person at that business. I don't know, but either way, I'm not going to go there. So I mean, I feel like at this point, the beauty conversation whether we're looking at magazines or thinking about makeup or all the things where beauty is the standard for selling, I know a lot of people people of color, POCs in my circles who are like, if you're not even trying, I'm not gonna do it. And I feel like that is literally one of the most effective ways to make change happen. As soon as money is entering into the conversation, it's like, oh, maybe we should add, this into there or that into there, I mean, and there's real quick, and then yes, I've been a part of a few different conversations about advertising campaigns. One specifically was, did you guys see the H&M ad with the black kid with the monkey shirt? There was that one, and then the recent Heineken campaign where I actually didn't notice it until it was brought up, and it was a whole thing where a white model or a bartender slid a Heineken down the bar, and the shot was basically the beer passing 3 black people. There's no one else in the shot but black people, and then the person who grabs it is also white. And I didn't notice it, so I just want to say that right off the bat. But it was interesting when it was brought up, because it was this weird subliminal thing of the Heineken, and it said something like lighten up or whiten up or lighten up, or I don't know. It didn't say white.
Lighter is better.
What, lighter is better? It said lighter is better, and the white person's grabbing. And so, but again, in both of those, yeah, it's crazy. So in both of those, in both of those ad campaign situations, at the very least, it's there was no one in the boardroom. There needs to be diversity in the boardroom, right? Because if I was in that room, I would have been what? No.
It's a hell no for me.
Right.
It's a hell no.
Yeah, it's for me too. It's a no. That's a no. But yeah, it's that is where the change is going to happen. Now, in closing, because I have a lot of thoughts always, but that's the whole other part of that conversation is how do we get more people in the boardroom? because there is a glass ceiling there, and there are gatekeepers and the whole thing, but that is something that needs to happen, is more people up top who are of all the different varieties of people making decisions, for sure. Yes.
As I sit here, I'm sort of recognizing all of the ways in which our narratives around beauty have to be arising out of just even sort of the larger frame of the land that we stand on, right, which is colonization, right? That as we talk about beauty, we acknowledge that it's rooted inherently in this experience of hierarchy.
Yeah.
Right? And that there isn't actually equal space for all of us to be considered beautiful according to the standard or the frame. Right? That even if we were to all be considered beautiful, also it would necessitate us still designating who is more of than others. Right? This isn't sort of a welcome to all space, even if you do all the shit you're supposed to do, like whiten your teeth and perfume your farts. Right? And in acknowledging that, as we think about how we designate or design the hierarchy and how that translates differently between cultures, even within other cultures that have more permission around things like body accessibility and ability, or size, or skin color. Right? Colorism was a huge thing in my life growing up, being a woman of color, and too dark to be light skinned and too light to be dark skinned meant something for how I could be perceived as worthy of being attractive, right? But that across cultures, we acknowledge that whomever is sort of the body of authority and whatever they aspire to be themselves, or whoever they see themselves as powerful, is what ends up being beautiful, right? So we're on land that was colonized by people who were white and theoretically at this time maybe thin, right? Or clear skin, or whatever the case may be, and really recognizing that these archetypes really come from, right, very linear imaginings and then spread out across the world. And a huge issue that we're having in this colonial frame is that because of how much access the States has to media, right, it's actually dominating other cultures' representation of beauty. Right, my family is Caribbean and has Persian and indigenous, linkages, and we see it filtering, right? I see it filtering into places in my family that it had never touched before, right? And how this standard of beauty is now coming to erase cultural artifacts in other communities.
That's a lot. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. There's a lot of complexity to the whole issue, and Marcia, you were talking about capitalism. I lived in mainland China right before Tiananmen, and there was a lot of suppression and shame about sexuality in a very communist country too. I think it's about power. I think it's a lot about how can we control people best. And if we shame people about, our identity is very linked to our sexuality. Like, are we valuable as human beings? And that might be even hardwired in, because originally we needed to procreate for our genes to pass forward. If I'm not desirable, no one's going to sleep with me, I will not have children, I will not procreate. Like, that could have just been part of our DNA at some point. But I think we can also use our brains to figure out that we don't have to always act on these baseline instincts. We had a pre-con, Jamaica and I we were talking about catcalling, and how that, what are they actually hoping to gain? Has anyone ever stopped and turned around and said, yes, let's fuck right now? That people don't do that. So it must be some kind of status thing that people are getting, like, hey, Joe, look, hey, I'm gonna, tell that bitch what for, whatever.
Did you ever see that episode of Sex and the City where Miranda does do that?
Oh, no, I didn't see that.
She's catcall, and she's like, hasn't had sex for a long time. I don't remember what it is, but she's turned around, she goes, hey, let's go right now. And he's like, back off, lady.
But I think a lot of it's about how we're perceived by other people. Like, I notice myself, like, I try to always I like to watch my head kind of get meta. But, like, if I'm flirting with someone and there's other people in the room, I will notice, like, are they thinking this is okay? Are they thinking this person is worthy? Or, is it cool? Is it someone cool I'm flirting with? And there's a part of my brain that does that. And I think, I'm guessing that probably happens with most people. We don't have to let it be in control, though. If we can just find people that are amazing, like the awesome sexual idea, like, if you're awesome, it might be fun to explore sex with you. But often we're caught up in the stereotypes, like, I don't want people to think less of me, this person isn't so conventionally pretty, or this person, like, doesn't have a lot of status in the community. What is it that I want to get out of this? Sex is an amazing experience when we're present with it. But often we get caught up in our heads in the stories we're telling each other. And I see it all the time at the play parties I throw, where people are like, no, I just have to have fucked a pretty person because now I'm okay. I have that little dopamine hit and I can check that box for this week or this day and go off, but I've got to get it again because it's not coming from inside.
That's really interesting to piggyback. I'm very, man, I know, so many thoughts at the same time. I'm very selective about who I socialize with, especially right now, just because I'm saying, yeah, it's exhausting, and I've had friends of like a decade lately who have just said some crazy things and had to end some friendships. It's been super hard. Anyway, all that sob stories, whatever. Okay, so, but in terms of like play parties and things, it's interesting because I a lot of times that I've been invited to them, I'm usually kind of I don't want to say a bystander. I'm there, but I'm not necessarily interacting sexually with people. But yet I still get invited, which is nice. It's a nice feeling to not feel like I. Yeah, exactly. And so it's been like, wow, that's really nice. It's a nice feeling. But it's interesting though, because even there is you don't really know maybe who's going to want to engage with you or not at a party. And there's part of this, I feel like, whatever, I'm not going to apologize for it. I feel like a lot of spaces that I've been in play parties, it isn't very diverse. And Victor, do you mind if I share? Yeah, sure. So Victor, yesterday, this is Victor, everybody. In case you weren't here. Hi, Victor. And so Victor, yesterday, Victor told me that he was a part of, and I might butcher this, I'm sorry, but you're a part of a party that was happening because this specific event, these event people were trying to get more people of color, which was, I thought, amazing because they acknowledged that there weren't many. And so they're like, what can we do to just make it more inclusive so people feel comfortable? I can say for myself that there have been a lot of times where, again, partially because of a certain standard of beauty or being selected because of a certain whatever, or is that person attractive or not or whatever, I've been like, I don't know if I even want to go. Because I don't, and not that I need to be in a space necessarily that has, not even just black people, but really, for me, I do feel comfortable if it's just like a variety of different people in a room. Like, there's a variety of different things I'm thinking based on what I'm seeing, whether that's true or not. And that makes me feel more comfortable personally. So am I gonna wanna get naked in a room with people where I don't see some common thing or something? Probably not, which it's funny because I didn't equate it to why I chose to be more of a voyeur in these spaces, but that's probably part of it. And, I have a lot of, I sometimes am asked to be a consultant or be on a committee for different groups and Burning Man tribes and things. And there was one specific intentional community that invited me to be a part of a conversation, actually leading a panel kind of like this to talk about how they could be more diverse. They asked me to be a part of it, which I was like, great, this is great. I don't speak for, I speak for, I can kind of be somewhat of a representative for a black woman who's cisgendered and sort of queerish. That's kind of all I represent, but I was meant to represent all of the other things that weren't white. And I was like, well, okay. So of course the first thing I said was, just so you know, I don't represent everything else, everybody else. But it was really interesting because it was a really good conversation. So it came up like, well, how do we get more people of color into our parties, and what would make people of color feel more comfortable, and all these things. And there were a few interesting solutions that came up. Fast forward to, I can't remember exactly what the incident was. It probably involved Trump, but it was something that happened where there was like a racial thing that was happening, and this person who is part of this community, possibly, but it was, this person in this community posts a lot of things all the time, so they're very active on social media. So it wasn't like, some of these people aren't, and that's fine, but this person was, and they chose to be silent about a specific race thing that was happening. And I was really upset, because I said, you're talking about all these other things, but this is the way, if you are trying to be inclusive, why are you staying totally silent on this thing? Like, those are the things that are gonna make us wanna come to your parties. The fact that you're not ignoring those things. Those are the things that are so important. Like, if I forget what it was, but it was something, I don't know. But long story short, I made it real clear, and I said, you had me facilitate that conversation. So of course I'm gonna notice this, but this is one big thing you could do to make people feel more comfortable and maybe wanna say yes to your parties. And it was, the resistance was amazing. It was like as if I had said something insane to this person. Like, but I believe in these things, and I said, but we don't know. If you're choosing to be silent on this, just because you think you're saying something or doing something doesn't make us wanna, we don't know. You gotta say it. So anyway, I don't know how that relates to beautism and sexuality, well, versus sexuality, but just meaning like, making people feel comfortable in a space is great, and feel accepted, and not being seen as other in terms of what they look like or what they're bringing to the table. I know I cannot be comfortable intimately if I don't feel comfortable in that way, you know?
Oh, that was
Or at least somewhat equal in some way.
And a great segue to, we only have a few minutes left, and I want to talk about the things that we can do to help counter beautyism and help other people feel sexual. So, I mean, it is, speaking up is a big part of it. There's a lot of microaggressions out there. If there's a bigger, older, fatter, disabled people tend to prioritize. So like, if you see someone, if I go up to a bar because I'm not conventionally pretty, the conventionally pretty people will often be served first. And I really love it when someone says, hey, she was here first. She's a human being, see her too.
Yeah.
And I see it on TV all the time. You watch a movie where there's two girls that like this guy, and the pretty one assumes that she gets to go after him because the other person doesn't have a chance. If we can start speaking up about that and saying, hey, why are, there's certain power and privilege with being conventionally pretty. There's certainly also other burdens that come along with it. But let's point out when we see things. We see microaggressions, or times when people are being overlooked, or someone says something that implies someone's not sexual. But I also I try to watch myself, because I know that someone who's conventionally pretty, male or female, however whatever binary or non-binary gender they might identify with, they're probably okay with me saying a compliment to them. Like, I know that they're probably used to that. But someone who's less conventionally pretty might have trouble with it. And there tends to be, it's very easy for me to throw nice comments to people that are more conventionally pretty. And I try to notice, how often am I complimenting people that don't look like the cookie cutters? Mm-hmm. Like, how often am I, and am I seeing the people that do look like match more like the cookie cutter? Am I seeing them for who they are as a whole being versus an objective thing?
Yeah. I
try very hard not to compliment them on their looks, because that's probably what they hear all the time, and they're more than their looks.
Yeah.
And I try to notice, like, people that are less conventionally attractive by the cookie cutter, like, what is amazing and beautiful and fantastic about them, and share that, because we do get filled up as we start hearing that positive. That's like, we're social beings. We want to be appreciated.
I want to say one thing, because I know we're running out of time. I want it to be like re-grounded in us that silence can be harmful.
Yes.
It can be really harmful, right?
Yes.
We all need someone sometimes to rally for us, because a lot of us in this room are probably tired as hell. I know I'm tired as a queer black woman.
I'm tired.
I consider myself like a triple minority some days. I'm like, well, if I don't get this box, I got this box. So I'm in all the boxes, right? But silence can be harmful, and we can't grow and make changes if we're silent. And so I just wanted to keep that in mind, like, yeah, we may have these thoughts, and we'll be like, oh, I should have said, yeah, you should have, but you still have that next time to say the thing. You still have that next time to change maybe someone else's thought. Just be like, hey, that was a shitty thing you said. And they're like, oh, what? You said something, so you acknowledge the situation. So just be mindful that silence isn't always the best thing, and sometimes it's the easiest. And I'm also guilty of this, and be like, I'm tired, I just can't deal with this fight today. But if you're able to deal with the fight, say something.
And by the way, just to piggyback on that, we're part of a Me Too panel at 2:30. 2:30. You will hear me say basically the same thing. Silence is a killer. We gotta effing stop the enabling. We gotta stop it. So if you want to hear me repeat that at 2:30, but no, it's also gonna be an interactive thing, so please come to that.
Yeah, I think it just, as we look at people, who do we assume is sexual and why do we assume that? At play parties, I'm kind of shy. I love great conversations at play parties, but very often people assume that I'm not available for play because I'm big. Like you actually play, and then if I play with someone else that I know, then there's like an opening for that. But I think there's a lot of that subtle we're like assuming it subconsciously who is sexual and who is not. And I do that myself too. Just the more we build the muscle of noticing where this is coming in, the more we acknowledge people. Like all humans are sexual, even if they're identified as asexual. It's a form of like our identity of how we express ourselves in the world. And everybody wants to be seen and heard. Things like not complimenting someone if they lose weight. One, we don't know why they lost weight. They could have cancer or something. But and also, but it implies that that's a plus. Everybody, like you can tell someone, oh, you look like you lost weight. And we're culturally is like, oh, thank you. You feel better about yourself just because it's so anchored. If we start fighting that and saying, wow, you look amazing today. You look like like you feel good about yourself without associating with, oh, you lost 5 pounds, therefore you're 5 pounds a better person.
Totally. Yes.
I lost about 30 pounds in 6 months, 40 pounds. Got the body I wanted. I got constant compliments. I was actually dying. And so, I had to come back with, actually, I'm really sick. And people just, they automatically went there, oh, you look great. As if they were presuming that that was something that I had accomplished, first of all. And second, that it was desired.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was better, assuming that it was much better.
Way better.
Yeah, I almost died. I lost 45 pounds. And people are like, oh, you were really sick and that was horrible, but you lost a lot of weight. That's great. Like it was worthwhile. And I was like, no.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Everyone, just please do better.
I really appreciate you all being here. This is a tough subject. Like, there's a lot of nuances. We're bombarded with this information. I really appreciate you looking at it, and my co-panelists for sharing their ideas. There's a sign-up sheet going around somewhere if you want to get a copy of the video, or if there's other people that couldn't make it that you think might benefit from it. It'll be available free. You just sign up and we'll send it to you. Because I think this topic needs more, people need to be more aware of it. Because we all get to be enjoying our bodies.
Thank you
Thank you.